what's on my mind today is consistency. I keep seeing this Kadarius Toney guy pop up on Twitter, and I'm like, this is like, he's the opposite of consistency. He did absolutely nothing for 3 years and then popped for 1 year. And now people think that he's actually going to be good in the NFL, which, I mean, it could happen. It's just really, really rare. And each season there's a player like this, a new flavor of the month, some guy that pops up out of completely nowhere. And then there's 37 new articles each and every day written about how he's the truth and you need to get him in, you need to get in on the ground floor. I don't like those guys. Those guys aren't my guys. I like guys that show us they're great year after year after year. And the guy that's on my mind today plays quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. His name is Baker Mayfield. First off, Baker had one of the best prospect profiles we've ever seen. When I'm doing prospect grading on quarterbacks, I'm looking for things like consistent efficiency and consistently high PFF grades, which means age adjusted. I want them to be at the top at age 18 and age 19 and age 20. When you age adjust for those things, I want to see how they perform. I want them to be relatively young. I don't want 23-year-old rookie quarterbacks. 22 or younger, please. Breakout age. I want them to break out at a moderate age. I want starting experience. I want them to play quarterback as a starter for 2 or 3 years in college. And I want draft capital. Draft capital matters so much for quarterbacks because film matters so much for quarterbacks. Draft capital is driven by film. And once you get outside like the top 15 picks in the NFL draft, even the back half of the first round is a total train wreck of just bust after bust after bust. Even within the top 15, there's a lot of busts, but once you get outside that, it gets scary. So anyway, with Baker, let's go through it all. Let's start with the easy stuff first. Baker Mayfield is the number 1 pick in the draft. In 2018, he was number 1. It doesn't get better than that. Number 1 pick, box checked. He was a 3-year starter, box checked. He has enough starting experience. Unfortunately, he was a 23-year-old rookie, box not checked. He had to transfer at one point. But anyways, he was a 23-year-old rookie. That's not what we're looking for. But on the flip side of that, he basically broke Player Profiler's breakout age metric with an 18.4 breakout age, which was in the 100th percentile. Box smashed. And from a consistent efficiency perspective, Baker was among the leaders in the nation using ESPN's QBR rating. His final QBR was 92.6, which puts him in the 97th percentile. A box smashed. And then I try to age adjust PFF grades, and here's where Baker ranked among QBs that went on to be drafted at each age. So this is quarterbacks drafted rounds 1 to 7. So he was, at age 20, he had the 4th highest PFF grade. At age 21, he was first. At age 22, he was first. When you take his collegiate average, he was first. Consistent excellence. That's what we're looking for. So now all that being said, the basis where I start with my QB grading system is with a model from Football Outsiders. It's called Cubase. And Baker ranks 3rd all time. If you haven't encountered Cubase before, go to the Goog, type in Cubase, Football Outsiders, and enjoy drafting better quarterbacks for the rest of your life. It's a total game changer. And if you're not using it, I believe you're making a mistake. So that being said, after he was a rookie, or after he was drafted 1st overall by the Cleveland Browns, he then stepped on an NFL field and he immediately set forth on a record-breaking rookie season under the tutelage of some truly incompetent coaching from the likes of Hugh Jackson, Todd Haley, Freddie Kitchens, and Greg Williams. If you can't make a more comical quartet of head coaches and offensive coordinators if you tried. That is as hilarious as it gets. And those are his rookie year coaches. Meanwhile, he's setting NFL records. And in fact, his rookie year PFF grade is one of the best we've ever seen. It goes Robert Griffin, Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, Baker Mayfield. Like, it is real good. Consistent excellence. So at this point, he appeared to be a genuine superstar. His ADP per DLF, per Dynasty League Football, had skyrocketed all the way up to quarterback 2, I believe, after that rookie season. And rightfully so. We thought we were looking at a genuine superstar. Then in his second year, things obviously went completely off the rails. It was an unmitigated disaster. The Browns ended up cleaning house again, making the Freddie Kitchens and Todd Monken experience a one-and-done endeavor. Completely flopped. And Baker was not free of criticism. He was real bad in 2019. The one shining light that I'm kind of clinging to when it comes to Baker's fantasy projections, the one shining light was he was making money throws at an absurd rate. He was 20th in pass attempts and yet 4th in money throws. This is a metric that comes from Player Profiler, and they define it as a money throw is defined as a completed pass requiring exceptional skill or athleticism, as well as critical completions in clutch moments during the game. So this is something that is measuring high skill level. And Baker has been phenomenal at it since entering the NFL. And then we get to 2020, and his weapons, Baker's weapons, were suspect. Like, we have Odell Beckham, who's great, but he only played 7 games, and then he got hurt. We have Jarvis Landry, who, again, is great, but he was recovering from off-season surgery. He wasn't even supposed to be ready to start the season, and he was out there. And then basically after that, you just don't have any other pass catchers other than David Njoku, but that's an entirely different conversation. We'll get into that another day, I promise. So they're trotting out a receiving core featuring like Donovan Peoples-Jones, a guy who couldn't even do anything in Michigan, and Hollywood Higgins. And that just isn't going to cut it at the NFL level. That's not good enough. And yet, Baker finished the season with an 81.6 PFF grade, which was 10th in the NFL. He was a top 10 quarterback on a per-play basis, according to Pro Football Focus. So this is an instance where we have elite, terrible, back to elite. I tend to side with the larger sample in situations like this. And then it kind of played out that way. Around week 7 in 2020, Baker got his groove back. Like, he was back in the saddle as one of the best football throwers on the planet. And from that point forward, from week 7 onward, he was 3rd in PFF grade. That is elite. That is very elite. And if you include the playoffs where things are supposed to get harder, Baker jumps all the way to 2nd because he got better in the playoffs. The guy's a gamer. All that being said, everything I've talked about so far has been about NFL. Like, is he a good starting quarterback? And he is undoubtedly a good starting quarterback. But this is a fantasy football podcast. And his points per game last year was very poor. He was 25th in points per game. That's not even a starter in Superflex. Here's the interesting thing about that, though. It's important to remember that in the middle of the season, they played multiple games that were in monsoon-type conditions. The Vegas game was, the Houston game was, and the Philly game, it rained. I don't remember the degree, but it definitely was less than ideal. And then if you recall the game against the Jets, their entire receiving core that isn't very good to begin with was wiped out by COVID. Those 4 games significantly hampered his end-of-year stats and his points per game average. If you take out those 4 games, he jumps all the way to 19.0 points per game, which would have put him at QB 12. So he's a 1 quarterback league starter if you remove those games. And to be fair, you should have known, don't start Baker Mayfield in these games. Monsoon conditions, not a wide receiver of... they didn't even have a wide receiver that you could name. You probably still can't name any of the wide receivers they had in that Jets game. He wasn't an elite quarterback from a fantasy perspective by any stretch in 2020. But the biggest takeaway here is at some point in the season, I think it was around week 5 or week 6, there were reports saying that the Browns were considering whether or not Baker Mayfield was in fact the answer at quarterback for the franchise. I think that he answered that question pretty clearly the rest of the way. So now we're looking at a guy turning 26 that's going to be a locked-in starter for the long term. Then all we have to deal with is the low pass attempts. This is a run-first offense after all. And that certainly hampers his ceiling, but it's baked into his price. His volume isn't going to go down. He's priced at his floor. He's priced at his low volume floor. So from an elite ceiling perspective, we either need an absurd TD rate or absurd rushing stats. The passing yards for quarterbacks doesn't impact their fantasy production as much as touchdowns do. Touchdowns are a much bigger driver of fantasy success. If you're looking for a guy that's going to outproduce where he's drafted, it's usually on the back of an absurd touchdown rate. Like something in that like 7 to 9% touchdown rate. That's where you start seeing like the Ryan Tannehills crop up that are not great quarterbacks, but they're okay. And then they just have this like amazing touchdown season, which Ryan Tannehill's had 2 in a row now. But that's within range for Baker Mayfield. Last season, I already talked about his money throws in 2019. In 2020, He had 39 money throws, which was second in the NFL. He did not have the second most pass attempts. He was about, I don't know, the Browns passed for one of the least amount of pass attempts for the entire season. So Baker Mayfield was doing a lot with very little. That's a very good sign. That's the type of thing that you're looking for when you're saying, well, could this guy have an elite touchdown rate? Yeah, he could, because he makes those kinds of throws routinely. What I'm trying to say is, go and buy Baker Mayfield. You need to buy Baker Mayfield right now because everyone is still afraid of this Kevin Stefanski offense that is low volume. They are low volume. I'm not projecting in any way that they're going to ramp up the volume, although I have been looking at some splits towards the end of the year, and after their bye, things got kind of exciting on the passing front. But that's a small sample, and we don't really know. We don't really know what they're going to do. So my suggestion is that you go and buy Baker because he's probably going to be in that back-end quarterback one range if things just, continue as they are. But if he gets that crazy TD rate, he could get into the top 6 probably. And if they ramp up the pass volume and he gets that crazy TD rate, we could be looking at a very, very good season. At the very worst, though, I think his floor is in the 12 to 16 range. His ceiling is probably in the 6 to 12 range. And he's probably going to be in the quarterback 12 range overall. And he's 26. He is a locked-in long-term starter. So this is the kind of player that you need to go and get in Dynasty. You can hold him and just plug him into your starting lineup week in and week out.